Must be December. Hello and welcome to day one of Dramvent 2023. So as I mentioned before, I'm going for something a little bit different to previous Decembers on Whisky Tube here, and I'm doing another Whisky Advent calendar, but instead of going for one of the Master of Malt offerings, I've gone for a different company. This is the 25-day the Scotch Whisky Single Malt Collection Advent Calendar, 25-day version from the Really Good Whisky Company. And if you haven't heard of them, that's actually their company name. And also says Cask Explorers, caskexplorers.com on it as well. I get the feeling that's probably like a subsidiary, a sister company. So I'll just show you a close-up of the calendar before I completely rip it apart. There is what appears to be a list of everything that's in the calendar on the back there, so if you want to see, I'll hold a close-up. I think you can see this on the website as well. I'm trying my best not to look at this because I am planning to do this blind this year. But yeah, the first thing you might notice about this is that it does seem quite a bit smaller than the Master of Malt ones. That's not because there's less in it, I think it's just more compact. Seems to be less empty space inside it. And I really like the design and layout and aesthetic of this one. Nice and small, compact and dense. Also, it kind of looks like the perforations might be a little bit better. Because in previous years with the Master of Malt calendars, I've struggled to get into some of them without ripping the front off. So hopefully that'll be a little bit better this time. You also might notice that this is a 25 dram calendar, whereas I think all of the Master of Malt ones are 24 days. They kind of cheap out a little bit and leave you to find your own dram on Christmas Day. This one we're actually going to have the full 25 drams for 25 days, including Christmas Day. So I'm going to have a little bit of extra work to do on Christmas Day aside from the usual Christmas message. Hopefully a few of you have actually managed to buy this one. You can taste along with me. If you have, please don't give me any spoilers for what's coming up if you've gone ahead or if you know what's coming up. But I'd absolutely love to know what you think of the drams as we go through them. If you have looked at buying this, whether you have or not, you'll know that it sells for £129.99, which means that the average dram price in here is £5.20, more or less. So, considering what I kind of see as my rule of thumb for samples is that you seem to always pay kind of a 100% markup compared to buying a full bottle, which is understandable because it all takes time and labour, and they've got to design the packaging, someone's got to pick everything, someone's got to pour them all, they've got to buy the bottles and the tops and screw them together. There's definitely a lot of work goes into these things, but if we are right about that kind of 100% markup, paying double per volume, we're probably looking at kind of like £60 per bottle whisky, that level of quality in this. So hopefully that's what we end up getting out of this. But I would say that with all of these advent calendars and samples in general, you're really paying a premium for the ability to try a whisky before you buy. And I don't mind that at all. I think it's completely understandable. You always pay a bit more when you're having someone split it up. And especially something like this, you're paying for the experience as well. You're paying for someone to think about what whisky to put in this, to find it and sort it all out and ship it out to you. You're paying for the experience of, if you choose to, have 25 blind drams. And I think £130 for this doesn't seem too bad. I think if you went out and you purchased 5 lots of 5 blind drams, it'd probably end up costing you quite a lot more than 130. So yeah, I do think that you're paying for the experience on this one, and it's an experience worth having. Saying that, what do I want out of this one? What am I looking forward to and hoping that we'll get? Well, I am pleased that because I have gone for the Scotch Whisky Single Malt Collection, we're not going to have any blends, we're not going to have any Irish whisky, we're not going to have any world whiskies, and that's not to say that they can't be fantastic whiskies, but the previous couple of years when I've done the Master of Malt calendars, to my preferences, the world whiskies and the Irish whiskies and things like that do have a habit of tending to be some of the less impressive drams. So really happy that we've got 25 drams of Scotch whisky this year. I think I'd also really like to see some good solid core range whiskies in here, things that are easily available, easily accessible, and hopefully some good presentations as well. Might be asking a little bit too much to have 25 grams of 46% ABV, because we know from the packaging that the average ABV on this is somewhere, I think it's about 44%, something like that. It is on there somewhere. So we know there probably are going to be some 43, possibly a couple of 40s in there. But I think if we could have a majority of non-chill filtered natural coloured whiskies and just well-made whiskies, that would make me happy. And perhaps some surprises in there, that would always be nice as well. If I could get some, it's the beauty of doing blind whisky tasting, you could get something that you've not been impressed before, and it gives you a chance to reevaluate it without prejudice. Or possibly on the other hand, if you get something that you've previously liked and perhaps the quality's dipped a little bit, it allows you to see that in more neutral terms. So yeah, that's what I would like. I am going to do something a little bit different this year. I have said that I'm going to try and do this completely blind. But what I'm also going to do that's a little bit different is have the leaderboard blind as well. So obviously I can't do the entire 25 grams without revealing to myself what they are, because that's just going to get far too confusing. But what I'm going to try to do, and this may or may not work, is to look at the leaderboard of previous drams and put each dram in there blind before I reveal what it is. And that may or may not work, because in the past there's been a few times when I've kind of rearranged things on the leaderboard late in the day and gone back, and sometimes I've kept half of each dram and tasted it again when I'm getting towards the end to pick the final order of the leaderboard. So yeah, may or may not work, but I'm going to try and do everything as blind as I can this year. So with all that out of the way, let's get on to dram number 1. December the 1st, door number 1. Which is it's in the top left here. Destroying that already. Hopefully these will come out a little bit easier than the Master of Malt ones, because there was a bit of box shaking in previous years. And I also noticed that there's no wax on the top, they're just metal screw tops. Hopefully we haven't had any leak in there, that would be a bit of a disaster. Fingers crossed. So, dram number 1. Clean glass, Cotswolds distillery glass. So I'll get that in there without revealing to myself what it is. Put that out of sight. Let's have a look at what we've got. So it certainly looks like whiskey. Looks a reasonably natural colour. So we don't know if there's been any colouring in this, but it looks like it could be natural. Very appley nose. Apples, caramel, a little bit of bitter oak, a little bit of a bourbon cask note, like popcorn, peanut brittle, caramel, perhaps a little bit of sweet vanilla in there, quite nutty, grainy, toasted grains. So very pleasant nose. I would say it's a very kind of stereotypical Scotch nose, that it's got quite a bit of maltiness, quite a bit of bourbon cask. It smells like decent quality whiskey. Let's see how it tastes. Not the strongest whiskey in the world. Decent flavours though. Doesn't taste overly old, but also not overly young either. I would guess that this is not 46% whiskey. Nose really starting to open up now actually. Getting a little more fruity maltiness, a little bit of apple peel and sweetened orange juice on the nose. Lovely. Nutty, biscuity, a little bit of a bitter oak note. Possibly not the freshest casks. ABV, I guess, between 40 and 43. Bitter orange, bitter oak, caramel, maltiness, bourbon cask. Probably like a 40 to 43 entry level 10-12-year-old Highland whiskey. Perhaps a little bit of dry oak on the nose as well. When I guessed 40 to 43% ABV, it's really all about the palate, because on the palate it is that little bit restrained. A very decent and respectable kind of stereotypical Scotch though. Let's see what we've got. So what do we think this is? I think I'm going to try and focus less on trying to guess what things are this year, because I feel like I've done that a little bit too much in the past, and it's possibly not that productive apart from showing off. Anyway, what have we got? It's a Glengoyne. So Glengoyne 10-year-old. So that is, I think that's their sort of standard entry level Glengoyne, isn't it? I haven't had that for a while. It is, I think it's pretty much as I remember it, in that it is a fairly stereotypical Highland bourbon driven Scotch whisky, and it's pretty decent. So it is low strength. It is, I believe, yeah, it's 40% ABV, so I guessed 40 to 43. I think that Glengoyne 10, it is a low strength entry level whiskey, but I think it's an entry level 40% whiskey that has a bit more flavour, and it just has that little bit more intensity compared to a lot of other 40% whiskies, which is always good. Good start. I think that's going to be a really good one as a kind of benchmark. A reasonably decent bar set for the rest of the calendar. Let me know what you think of Glengoyne 10 if you're tasting along or if you've had it before. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow. Cheers.